once you've got the basic rhythmic foundation and the vocals together and the whatever the primary instrument is, then it's time to start developing the arrangement and the journey of the song. Choruses should somewhat sound familiar every time they come because the lyric is repeated, and you want the music to also reinforce. And listen, anything I'm saying is not an absolute. It's not the be all end all rule. But I'm talking in generalities and larger points. And these are bigger things to think about and realize. And then, of course, once you get inside it, you can change and modify and challenge established ideas. But you want choruses to feel familiar as they develop. You can add instrumentation. You can add another harmony that wasn't there before. Kind of build out the color and shape of them. But the power of record making is in arranging, and that's the rhythm inside parts, the layers to parts, the way they're harmonized, the instrumentation you choose, when it can appear, and to find interest. It's cool when something only happens one time in a song and it's not repeated over and over again. At the same time, we as listeners and human beings love repetition. So, in certain types of music, like the beat never changes. There's never a fill in it. The groove is just so good and just so consistent that becomes something really enjoyable. But typically what's happening when you have a foundation like that, there's a lot of other stuff changing over the top of it. It's almost like the repetition of that groove, and it never diverging from that, it becomes hypnotic, and then all the other stuff that you can change over top of it can be really interesting and create the hooks. So once you get the basic stuff down, it's good to start experimenting with what you can add, and maybe you only have a keyboard that doesn't play the first chorus. It starts in the second verse. And then it maybe finishes out the song, or maybe it plays in the second verse, or only plays in the bridge and the end. It's just like you can establish some things and then revisit them, but you want to build dynamic and color and have it come in and go away. And maybe if you've had something like sort of bright, like a piano that's playing a very bright arpeggiation for the chorus. So that happens in the first chorus. Well, it might be nice to have it go away after and stop after the chorus. But then you've introduced some sort of bright movement. Well, so whatever follows that first chorus, probably a second verse. There might be a musical interlude. You might want to have something that's up in that range, but that's a different instrument. It's kind of doing something a little different. But it's helping the listener go on a journey of like, well, once that thing has been introduced, that there's something else that continues that feels that way, but the way in which you're doing it changes. Or maybe you want the contrast of, and maybe it's good to have that bright thing go away and it settle back down to things that are not as bright, and wait to the chorus again. And maybe the place for that thing to continue and be a different instrument is in the bridge. It's about development and keeping, having a push and pull, having the dynamic come up and down. And a lot of it has to do with the vocal and the feeling of the performance, what the lyric is maybe saying, and sort of painting around that and supporting that, maybe giving it space at certain points. What is very typical in I'm going to run down a very typical arrangement for you that we're all very used to in popular music. You've got some sort of very compelling introduction that draws you in. And you can start on a lyric and so you've started on a verse, but most of the time what happens is there's a little burst of music or a soundscape or something that is uniquely identifies is happening, so that the next time you hear it, you know exactly what it is, or it catches your ear, or it is a main melodic or rhythmic hook of the song that's like, bam, here's a little taste of it. We're going to visit this later. We're going to draw you in. Here it is. Then you have a verse, a section that's a little bit emptier, chills out. You might have what's called a pre-chorus or a build into a chorus, where you kind of stay on the rhythmic feel of the verse, the first storytelling section, but the top line melodies change a little bit and develop. The chord structure might change a little bit. You might have a chord added in that wasn't in the verse, but the feel kind of stays the same. You get to a chorus, which is sort of the bigger section and it doesn't necessarily have to be bam, like it's a lot of instrumentation comes in. It's just where the energy comes up a little bit, or the top line melody, the lyric is the sort of the selling point and the foundation of the whole story that's being told. I mean, sometimes in really popular music now, the chorus is almost emptier. It's like you get kind of a cool rhythmic verse with a hook that draws you in, and then the chorus empties out, it goes to halftime, which means the rhythms are half as much as they were before, and then bam, you got this. Then the vocal goes away, and then you have this huge instrumental section that's a hook, that musically is bigger than the chorus. And I'm sort of jumping back and forth between two sequence and arrangement styles. But you have a chorus; they're typically bigger, or you could consider it as like an A and a B section of a chorus, and then oftentimes after the first chorus, you revisit what was the intro, or that hook line, or you introduce a new hook line, and then it goes back to another verse, but the second verse is usually more developed than the first verse. The rhythm kind of picks up a little bit. There's a little bit of instrumentation and color added there. Sometimes the lead vocal is harmonized for a line or two. You go back to the pre-chorus or that change. Now, I'm not saying you have to have a pre-chorus. You can go from verse to chorus in a song, certainly. Then you go to that second chorus. Then after the second chorus, you've already introduced the idea of that there's a musical section, a big musical section after the first chorus. So you go to the second chorus, and sometimes it becomes a solo, or a big musical bridge where there's a big shift. You might revisit that hook, that intro hook, or the new hook that's after chorus 1, after chorus 2, but it's twice as long. And I'm talking about more of what's like sort of a typical arrangement in modern contemporary music, and then you get that big section after chorus 2 that may be a bridge, maybe a solo, maybe an extension of an earlier hook, and then you get like an emptier section. It may be a chorus, it may be a broken down chorus, it may be like a quieter verse, or maybe it's just another verse, and then bam, you've got another big chorus, or another big hook, and then there's some sort of continuation of that chorus. Sometimes the last chorus is longer than the choruses that come before it. Sometimes the second and third chorus are the same length, but the first chorus is half as long, and you kind of get this big ending section. Sometimes it just goes through the chorus one time, and then you sort of vamp out or just sort of riff on an ending section. And a lot of times in the endings of songs, or the last chorus and through the end of a song, you might have had little pieces of hooks and parts kind of sprinkled throughout the arrangement as it's kind of building up and coming to this place, and then suddenly, oh wow, they're all playing together as opposed to sort of happening separately. And so you have this big amalgamation and sort of celebration at the end of the song. I mean, I would say, that's not an absolute, but I would say that that's kind of what a lot of songs do and move through. I would say that it's very predictable in the way that I can tell you about that. It's because I see it a lot. It feels comfortable, and it's what we know as listeners. It's a familiar feeling. That's okay. If it's okay to have a structure that does that, try and find some way to challenge what's going on with that. But I would also encourage you to listen to older music. Music that is not of a popular radio-ready genre, and sort of see what past trends have been in arrangement and borrow from that. You know, in the 70s, FM radio, when FM radio was new and classic rock was the king of radio, that the way that those arrangements would work would be you'd have a cool introduction, you'd have a quick verse, quick chorus, you'd kind of get, in about 2 minutes, you'd get sort of a condensed version of what I just described, maybe even a minute and a half, and then they would just like riff, and you'd just go on these musical journeys, and then you might get a minute and a half, 2 minutes of what was a typical song structure, and then they'd stretch out and they'd jam for a couple minutes, and then they may or may not return to what was the early part of the song. And that was a little bit of a style that worked for radio because, before that, in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, songs were really short. And it was about like, let's get through this. Let's have it hooky, couple choruses, boom, done. Well, they kind of, in the 70s, they were kind of sticking to that formula, and then they'd start to jam out, and then the song could get faded out. And on the album version, you have this big long version. And so it's just like it's interesting and important to study older recordings, older records, because then you should learn these things and understand these things, because you can infuse and borrow from them. Listening to big band music or jazz from the 50s or classical music, it may not be your cup of tea, but I guarantee you'll get some inspiration out of it, because they use different chord voicings. They use different, the 6-4-1, 5 progression, or some order of those chords is like so common in music now, or a couple chords used repetitively through a popular song. It begins to feel a little bit stale. So if you listen to that other stuff, the older stuff, and you just kind of get ideas about what other ideas are, different melodies, different combinations of things, it will inform you and hopefully give you some ideas to challenge what you can do inside of something that is, because you want to make music that is contemporary and accessible to a degree, so that people will pay attention to you. I'm not suggesting at all that you should be a sellout. Art is first. You need to stick to your artistic convictions and your style and taste, and just be resolved in that. But just keep in mind that if you want to reach a lot of people, well, you have to have some element or some consideration for what that means. You can totally be a maverick and do things by your own rules and break all the rules of convention and be successful and change change music for everybody. That has happened a lot over the history of music too. But those people have been exceptional, and they have had really rare opportunities. They've come along at really certain opportune times in history. So, don't bank on just being completely amazing and creating your own space. It's a lot like life. There's a little bit of compromise in it, unless you're willing to go the hard road. So taking this journey of discovery and doing your homework is going to be a key. Even as a record producer and a creator, it's like I study music from all times and genres, just to challenge my mind. And even if I don't quite understand how something happened, it's nice to just hear it and have my own interpretation of it, and just kind of collect these things and then attempt my own version of it, or whatever it has inspired me to, the idea that it's giving me, because that's how I figure out what I'm capable of and what I like and what I want to do. And as an artist and a creator, maybe you're an artist and a producer, or however, it's like taking inspiration from other things and attempting it and working on it. That's the only way you can really discover who you are. I think there's very few of us that know absolutely who we are and how to accomplish it right from the get-go.